I just, can you hear me? How about that?
I'll get it.
Wait, I did something. No? All right, maybe I need to. How about that? That's a little better. Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted, I came from another training where I was doing customer service training in another community. And I have to say, when I got here, I felt very welcomed. It was, you did a great job of customer service on me, and I came in the door. And thank you, I felt very welcomed. I'm a social worker. I work with Allwyn Health Employee Assistance Program. I'm a certified employee assistance professional. And I'm not sure you all know that you have an EAP. How many of you were aware that you have an EAP? A couple of hands up, not everybody?
What is an EAP?
Okay. An EAP is an Employee Assistance Program. The town of Scituate has purchased some kind of insurance through MIA, which is Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association. And MIA has thrown in this Employee Assistance Program for every employee and your household members. So I just wanted to be sure that you knew about the program. This is an absolute confidential counseling and referral organization. So on the table out front, you may have seen magnets, and it has our telephone number on it. So please feel free to take a magnet, and you can give us a call on the 800 number, and you or anyone in your household would be eligible for up to 3 sessions of counseling, totally free to you on any issue. And also there's a legal and financial benefit where you can call the 800 number and access free legal or financial information for 30 minutes consult with a professional. And one of the other things we offer is training. And so Jill in your HR found out about the training, and she felt that it would be a great benefit to be able to offer this to you all. So I'm happy to be here. I've been to Scituate before and share with you some of this information. Now, for a lot of you, this is going to be repetitive. You already know about this, but there are some aspects of the law that preventing workplace harassment and discrimination. Some of the law that may be a little bit new to you, and I'm going to highlight some of those things. So this is what we're going to, we should be here just about an hour. And I love it. I noticed everybody sits in the way back and kind of comes, But that doesn't get you off the hook, because I'm going to be asking you to participate with one another in a few exercises toward the end, where you're going to be looking at some scenarios that'll be up on the screen and trying to determine is this harassment? Is it not? What would you do? That kind of thing. So those gray areas. So I'm going to be asking you to participate in some way, even though you're trying not to. All right. So what are we going to be doing today? Well, we're going to be looking at the definition of discrimination. We'll be looking at the definition of harassment and bullying. I'm including bullying in this because while you in the school for students have a policy, no doubt, about bullying because of all the issues that have occurred across the nation with bullying in schools, and you have set aside a policy. This is just to say that while school systems may have a bullying policy, workplaces do not as yet. And so I just wanted to highlight that a little bit. We're going to be talking about state and federal laws that cover harassment and discrimination issues, and look at kind of the protected categories in each of those. The Employment Opportunities Commission, EEOC, covers those federal laws, and MCAD, which stands for Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, covers Massachusetts laws. And some are similar, but some are a little bit different. Some states have taken issue to, have attempted to enact laws for their particular state to cover additional protected classes. So we'll be talking about that in a minute. We're going to talk a bit about sexual harassment. We'll look at, as I mentioned, those workplace harassment scenarios, and for you to be not in small groups, it's too big a group here, but be having some discussion about that. And then we'll be looking at your workplace culture and how is it that you can prevent situations from occurring, what can help with that. So we have quite a bit to cover, and so I'm going to get going. And thank you for your kind attention. And you do realize that this is being videotaped, so be on your best behavior. Let's see. Okay, whoops. So what is discrimination? Well, discrimination in the workplace is any decisions that are being made about an individual in the workplace based on that individual's characteristics, not necessarily on their qualifications for doing that job. And when I say any workplace action, it might be in the hiring, firing, in promoting, any kind of hiring practice associated with the workplace. And what do we mean by workplace harassment? Many of you may have certainly have heard harassment, and maybe even have used it yourself, saying, "I'm being harassed." There is a particular set of circumstances that must occur for something to be considered harassment. And so it is verbal or physical conduct that unreasonably interferes with an individual's ability to perform their work, and in so doing creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. But the key here is it's based on an individual's membership in a protected class. So while not all, I should tell you, not all situations in the workplace meet those criteria. So let's take a look for just a second. I keep going too fast here. So while you may have an unpleasant work conditions, it may not be legally considered harassment. It needs to, some of the criteria are that the situation must be, what has occurred must be severe or pervasive, and the individual who is subject to this harassment must feel that it's a hostile work environment, and the hostile work environment must be related to a protected class. So let's talk a little bit further about what do we mean by these protected classes. First of all, there are some federal laws that protect, of course, all the states, but then there are state laws that are protected within those confines of those states. So in the federal law, that way back in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, it prohibited workplace discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, and sex or gender. And it was a time, and we're observing the 50th anniversary of that time, 1963, 1964, where the March on Washington, you may have seen stuff like that, and be thinking back at that time how people of color, but also women, were being treated in the workplace. If you got pregnant, you were out of a job. If you might not be even eligible for a job if you were of a different color or nationality. So these protections were vital at that time and protect us today. Then in 1967 came the Age Discrimination Employment Act, and in this, the protected class is people 40 and over. And so with your younger colleagues who say, I am the 20-somethings and 30-somethings who say, I'm being discriminated against, they're not part of a protected class. So it's 40 and over. Then in 1990 came the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination based on on mental or physical disability. Now, the person needs to be able to do the job. They must be qualified to do the job. But if there is an accommodation that can be made to help them do the job effectively, and they request that, they need to have that accommodation as long as it's reasonable. An example might be, I used to work with a young woman who was in a wheelchair, and she did an excellent job answering the phone, doing her work, but the only accommodation she really needed was that her desk was too low. And by raising the desk, that was enough of an accommodation for her to manage the job very effectively. There may be other kinds of accommodations that people need to have that are low cost or no cost, but need to be requested by that individual. And please, Jill, if there's anything you want to jump in, please feel free. Then in 2008, a new law was enacted federally called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. This is one that you may not be familiar with, GINA law. Kind of unusual. When you think about what was happening in 2008 with the breaking of the genetic code and the Genome Project, where people started to worry that is somehow this information about my genetic background going to start affecting me in the workplace, and what kind of protections can be there for the individual who in the workplace maybe has a genetic predisposition to have whatever. For example, Hodgkin's lymphoma. You wouldn't know about Hodgkin's disease. You might be able to know that you're going to have it in the future, or have the disposition perhaps to have it. But what if somebody learned about that ahead of time and then said, we're not going to hire this person because think of the medical liability that our organization is going to have. So this law protects against that information being used against an individual in employment. Now, of course, we have other laws, HIPAA laws, which protect medical information. So we shouldn't be having this conversation about the GINA law, but this was put in place when people started getting a little scared about what this new information might lead to in the workplace. And then at the bottom orange thing talks about Massachusetts law. So we talked about the federal laws and who is protected, the protected classes under federal law. But in Massachusetts, there's some additional ones. Criminal records is one, where you cannot, you don't need to disclose your criminal record until after the hiring process. There's some on the application. And of course, sexual orientation is prohibited. We can't discriminate against sexual orientation. And new on July 1st of last year, came into being a new law on the books in Massachusetts where transgendered individuals cannot be discriminated against in employment. So these are additional protected classes in Massachusetts that aren't always found in other states. And another example, I believe it's Minnesota, that decided that they wanted to add height and weight, as you can't discriminate against somebody based on height or weight. And I believe that is enacted in Minnesota. In Massachusetts, they're trying to add, I saw that the Congress is kind of looking at the legislature is looking at the possibility of adding weight discrimination as one of those protected classes, but it has not as yet passed. So we are not protected in those areas as yet. So to review, some of the federal laws that prohibit workplace discrimination and harassment are based. These are the protected classes I talked about: religion, national origin, ethnicity, race and color, sex or gender, age discrimination, disability, genetics. And the last one is down there. It's not a class so much as retaliation. Somebody can, if somebody has filed a complaint of discrimination or harassment based on a protected class, and then goes back to the workplace and feels they are getting retaliated against in the workplace for having posed that, filed that complaint, they can file an additional charge of retaliation. So an example, on Cape Cod several years ago, there was a country club, golf club organization, where the CEO was heard to say, we need to have younger blood in our management. Not a good thing to have overheard. So when he had layoffs, 12 layoffs, of the 12, 10 people were over the age of 50. So a suit was filed by one of the people who had been laid off, filing for age discrimination. And that person went back to the golf club, to the country club, as a member's guest and was denied entry into the club. And also add to, besides age discrimination, there was retaliation and was found on both of those. So this is an example. Any questions about this? The different classes, so those are the federal, and I mentioned the Massachusetts law. These are the additional ones that are protected under Massachusetts law. So there you go. Okay. I did say I wanted to talk a little bit about workplace bullying. And of course, this is something, as I mentioned, that is not protected under this, under federal or Massachusetts law as we speak. However, it is something that our Massachusetts legislature is taking up as an issue, just to consider, is this something that we want to add to the books of protection? But this would be any kind of inappropriate conduct that could rise to the level of illegal harassment, but it's not necessarily, directed at a protected class. So there may be some bullies out there, people who are bullying those in the workplace, who are creating this sense of, the person who's feeling bullied may feel isolated, socially isolated, may feel that they're being talked down to, that they've been given more work than anybody else, or they feel worn down and pretty frustrated by bullying. What we found is that in a study that 62% of cases of bullying that came to the attention of the employer, that sometimes the situation was made worse by bringing that to the attention of the employer. So there were no protections. But what we found too is very often those bullies are bosses. So that's probably why. While and you can see here that many states have tried to pass some healthy workplace bills, but haven't been successful yet. And maybe down the road. We find that sometimes in creating a respectful workplace that bullying is more of a problem sometimes than harassment. So if your organization has a professional conduct policy, this may be included, bullying behaviors may be covered under a professional conduct. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sexual harassment, and you all are aware of what this is, I'm sure. But just to reflect that it's those unwelcome sexual advances where there are requests for sexual favors or any physical conduct or verbal conduct of a sexual nature. The thing is that the quid pro quo we think of where a supervisor is requiring a sexual favor of somebody who reports to that individual. Only one incident of that could get that person in a heap of trouble. But these advances interfere with a person's ability to do their job and create an uncomfortable work environment. And so we have to be careful about how we interact with the people around us. And I'm sure you are very careful with that, particularly as you are responsible for those and have a code of conduct around students. And this is extended to your colleagues as well. So before I get into the scenarios that I wanted you to take a look at, I'm wondering if any of you have any questions, concerns, things that you want to be sure that we cover. Anyone? Okay. So I'm going to put on the board a series of scenarios. And what I have them up here for a particular purpose, each one of them, because I want you to kind of look at them and figure out, is this something, is this sexual, is this harassment? And if so, if I were a supervisor, what would I be doing in this case? Or if I was a colleague, what would I be doing in this particular case? Okay, so I'm going to put this up, and what I'd like you to do is kind of read the scenarios. Now, I'm wondering if it's going to be unhandy to try to get you in groups, clearly. It's just too big a thing. So I'd like you all to read all of them. If you would, though, with the person next to you, be talking about the various scenarios and think about, is this harassment? And if it is, how would you handle that as a supervisor or as a colleague? Okay, so feel free to talk, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to look this over and come to some conclusions. Then I'd like to talk about it, okay? and be talking with your neighbor about them. I can't tell if you're really talking about that or when is 2 o'clock coming around. Right? But I'm curious about what you think, and feel free to speak up, please. What do you think about that first one? Is that a harassment?
Yes.
The supervisor and staff of treatment, I'm reading this for those people who should have worn their glasses. Staff of treatment and 2 women at lunch to celebrate a staff member's birthday, and of course that's off campus, right? One of the men tells a joke of sexual overtones, everyone laughs except for one of the women who's quite offended when she says so. Everyone tells her she's too sensitive. Is that harassment?
We don't think so.
Does it?
It's inappropriate.
It's inappropriate? Okay.
Poor judgment.
All right, poor judgment. What, as a supervisor, if you were in this group and you're having lunch at the local Panera, okay, and this happens, what as a supervisor would you do? Yeah.
I think reasonable improvement enters into it. What we don't know is if the woman was not offended because everybody else had a very high tolerance for inappropriate behavior, or conversely, because she had no tolerance for walking that line. So I think reasonable improvement enters into it. Would other people in the comparable situations feel the same way? So I would explore that first as a supervisor.
Okay. And kind of what's behind her feelings? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Would another person in a similar situation tend to feel the same way?
That would be a reasonable person kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? As a supervisor, what would you do? You'd explore that idea. Anything else? Yes.
I think the manager should point out that it's not a question of whether or not he thinks she should be offended or not. If in fact she's offended, then the person has to back her off.
Right. And so this is, just as you teach your children, it's in the eye of the beholder. You might say something that you think is really funny, but the other person is offended. We have to make sure that we're careful that if somebody is offended by something, that the behavior ends there. You don't want to cross that line. With this one situation, would that go to the level of harassment? Do you think? Just a guess. Probably not, because it's not necessarily severe or pervasive if it's just this one time. Would it be effective? It's off campus. That's the question I have. And these are people who work together, but they're not on campus. Would it still be effective then? Be thinking about harassment off campus? Is it moot? Because they work together, and it's an extension of work, basically, even though it's a celebration and lunch and so on, it would be considered still in the workplace, even though it's not physically in the workplace. Okay. All right. How about that? I didn't quite get. So, as a supervisor, you'd be thinking about whether this rises to the level of sexual harassment. But would you be talking with the folks who told the joke? Probably, maybe just a little warning, we've got to be appropriate here. And why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that?
Well, you want to set up a standard for the workplace.
Absolutely. You want to set the tone for the expectation of the people working under you and your colleagues. And so by letting it go, it's basically saying it's okay behavior, and truly it's not appropriate. Okay. Let's take a look at that second one. A female employee is asked to work late, have dinner with a male client, and this is kind of a corporate probably thing. but just to give you an example. And at dinner, the client makes repeated comments with sexual overtones. These comments make the employee uncomfortable. She declines the next two requests to work late over dinner. The client complains to the employee's manager. She's uncooperative, touchy, and poor at client relations. As a supervisor, are we talking, does this look like harassment to you, sexual harassment to you?
Yes.
Okay, and as a supervisor, what's your role? What should you be doing?
Protecting the employee.
Protecting the employee. Now, this is somebody who's not an employee. This is somebody from outside the organization who is, with another company. But as an organization, you're required to protect your employees, no matter where the discrimination might be coming from or the harassment might be coming from. So, what should you do as a supervisor? What would you do? Anyone? Well, you probably, yes?
Talk tactfully to the client.
Okay, talk to the client.
Tactfully.
Tactfully, talk to, okay. And perhaps let that person know that that was inappropriate behavior. But actually, you haven't learned anything. All you've heard from your client is about how she's unresponsive and not good at customer service. Yeah.
You need to hear the employee's perspective as well.
Absolutely. You have to talk to the employee, make sure, see what the situation is, and take action based on that. And to bring it home, so let's just say you have a vendor who fills vending machines. Somebody comes in regularly once a week, fills machines, and goes to pass the administrative offices, and each time says something off color to one of the staff members in administrative offices. And that administrative person goes to her supervisor, or his supervisor says, this was inappropriate. Talking to that vending company that we don't want Steve coming back. He's got to change his behavior, or we don't want him coming back. That kind of thing is one way, of protecting your employee. So that might.
We had a situation 12 years ago when we renovated the building where the construction employees were holding up numbers, ranking the high school girls as they walked by. So they were removed from the situation. But those of you that were here remember that.
So, as administrators, you took action and made sure that did not happen anymore. Okay. Let's look at number 3. This is Jack, who has risen to the position of team leader, but he's not getting very respectful behavior from his colleagues. He used to be one of them, and now he's gotten this promotion. He's team leader, and they're kind of resentful, apparently. And as a result, they decided to give him the silent treatment. So when he gets in the office every morning, he says good morning, and they say nothing back. At lunch, they don't like to sit with him. They move away from him. Is this harassment?
Bullying.
It might be bullying. Bullying. What could Jack do?
Talk to his supervisor.
He's got to kind of talk to these guys, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can't allow this. He has to lead. Come on, let's lead. Talk to his groups, make sure that they're on board, and maybe acknowledge that this is kind of tough. That he's in charge, but he is in charge, and we're not going to do this anymore. So, yeah. How about that last one? Manager supervises a female employee, comments to her that her greatest asset is her pretty smile, and on another occasion he tells her he keeps her around for bright eyes, and she feels demeaned about this. He should be more attuned to the work she performs. What should she do? What do you think? Yes.
taught
Yeah.
express herself, and I don't feel it's harassment because I don't feel it's that, it's not that piece, but it
Right.
is something that she should address.
Right.
It's just-
Right. We hope that she would be able to talk to her superior and let him know that how she feels about this, and that stop that behavior before it continues. She's let it go once, but that second time, and we don't, and we've all done this, where we compliment somebody on what they're wearing or how they look, and you know with your friends it's probably just fine. But there's some people who might interpret things differently, and we have to be kind of careful, acknowledging that it's, again, in the eyes of the beholder. So we have to be careful about that. But you know your friends, you know the people who you can tease and that kind of thing, and they're kind of work groups that you feel comfortable with, and you can play around with. The thing is, if you're doing something like off-color jokes with your group, who is overhearing it and being offended? Or not just off-color, but something that might be offensive to somebody related to religion, race, color, ethnicity, anything like that, age, who is in earshot. So we need to be careful. This is we want to have a respectful workplace, and just raising awareness of what's going on can be helpful. So hopefully she'll talk to him and it will end, and then he'll let her know what a great job she's doing, right? Good. All right. So here's one more I want you to read through and be amazed, okay? So in reading through this, okay, so for those of you who didn't bring your glasses, so we have this female neurosurgeon who is working with the chief of staff and in a teaching hospital and claiming gender discrimination, sexual harassment, and retaliation by the hospital. And because of all the things that went on here. If this went to jury, what would they find? I see some nods. This would be harassment, sexual harassment, and gender, and retaliation. Now, why all those things, do you think? Why?
She's in a protected group.
Protected group, right? She's in a protected group, and the kinds of things that were going on. You're just a girl. Are you sure you can do that? Somebody who is a neurosurgeon, come on, at a hospital dinner, she's reporter chief suggests she get up on the table and dance to show the female residents how to behave. She complained of her treatment, and what did the hospital do? They sent her for an evaluation to see if she was fit to do the job. So, yeah.
I have a dumb question. How is she protected? Just by being female?
For the sexual harassment. The sex,
All right, got it.
gender, and sexual harassment grouped together. Yeah. So, if there was an award, and this is a real case, what do you think the award was? How much? What do you think? The award was $1.2 million, and it was, I'm not sure how it was divvied up, whether it was split down the middle or a portion, but both by the chief of staff and the hospital. because the hospital should have done more to protect this individual. They knew, they should have known about the situation and should have protected this individual. So when you think back, way back, when Herman Cain was on the GOP, was wanting to get on the GOP ticket for presidential candidate, and all this stuff about his past, many years prior, harassment claims and so on, they came to haunt him. And so not only did he suffer with financial issues as a result of his action and these suits, but it really affected him on the job, and he ended up having to bow out of the race, remember, years ago? Because these things, they catch up with you, and it's hard to defend oneself. So we want to stay away from harassment claims for sure. So if I've experienced or witnessed harassment, what do I do? And if you feel that you have been discriminated against or harassed, what do you do? Any thoughts? What do you do? You all have a harassment and discrimination prevention policy in place. Does everyone know where to find it? Where did they find it?
It's in the SPS policy manual.
SPS policy manual. Okay, and in it would tell you exactly the procedure that is recommended in this policy of how you report. But hopefully, if you can report take some action by reporting to a supervisor. If the supervisor is involved, go to that next level, or human resources. Very, very important to do that reporting.
Jane?
Yeah.
I'm the official harassment officer for staff.
She's wearing red. I hear her. Jill. Okay. So go to Jill, absolutely. Let her know. The thing that is that you all should know, I mean, that would be the ideal procedure, is to report to a supervisor and make sure that the supervisor reports to Jill. Because just as this hospital they didn't do anything about it. There have been situations where a supervisor has kind of held this information in that department, whatever it is, and hoping that it will go away or brush it under the rug. But what happens is that nothing happens, and that individual then says, you know what, I'm going to take it to the next level, and it's not going to be Jill. I'm going to go to MCAT, or I'm going to go to the EEOC to get action. And so then it's out there to those organizations that are going to be reviewing this complaint, and then the organization, the school, the town, hears in the back door, all of a sudden is hearing from MCAT or EEOC, and they had no clue that this was going on. And they should have known. So that's why it's real important when people are reporting that you go up the line to make sure that your specific reporting person knows what's going on. So it's not a surprise, and an investigation can occur, right? Any questions about that? Oops, I really messed up there. Sorry. Well,
Go to slideshow.
Bottom right.
bottom right. Bottom right, the other right. Where?
Slideshow at the top.
Up at the top of the slideshow.
Slideshow, yay. All right, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so if you are an observer of harassment or being harassed, certainly speak up. Because actually the harasser may not be really clear that they're doing something illegal. And that way you can stop that person hopefully from the very beginning. You can document, you can get a witness, and you'll need to follow your organization's policy for harassment prevention and cooperate with any kind of investigation. One of the struggles for people who have filed a complaint, have gone to a supervisor to complain about a situation, and is that they can't always know that action has been taken. And it's one of the frustrations that I hear at the EAP. People cry, I filed this complaint, but I just haven't heard anything. And the result of the investigation is a personnel matter and therefore can't be disclosed. So what they might only hear is, we're taking care of it. So that's one of the frustrations people have. That's wrong. Okay. So here are the resources available to you all. The Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. And you actually have 300 days from the last incident to file a complaint. There's a Boston office, there's a website for all the information about how to file a complaint. And then for the federal resource, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, similarly, that 300 days to file, and a telephone number and a website. So some of you may be managers. Should I talk a little bit about management? Okay. For those of you who are managers, just want to mention a couple of things. I alluded to it in the talk about how you should have known if something was going on. Employers have something called vicarious liability. In other words, they're responsible for what they know or should have known. And that's why it's important to do the reporting process. Make sure that everyone, not everyone, but the people who need to know about a complaint being filed. And individual supervisors who ignore or minimize complaints or unaware that these things are going on, but should have known, or are perpetuating harassment on their own, can be personally liable. So it's really important it's almost like, okay, a hot potato, I'm going to hand it up to the next level. Make sure that the organization knows about this. There will be what management can do to prevent harassment is absolutely creating that respectful work environment. And if, as a manager, you're seeing something going on that is inappropriate, to call people on and make sure they understand that this is inappropriate kind of behavior. Make sure it stops. And if somebody were to file a complaint, make sure that there isn't any retaliation going on. That's really important. You're coaching your employees to be respectful of one another, follow through on any suspicion that you might have, something going on, or any observations that you have. Certainly being accessible is going to be really important, where people feel comfortable coming to you to report an issue. If somebody comes forward with a complaint, certainly Jill will be handling it. She'll do that, take care of the investigation. However, you might want to collect as much information, the who, what, when, where, how information, and gather that in a report. And make sure that you're documenting this information from the person who is reporting to you. One thing is somebody may be coming to you with something that sounds very, in your view, so what? But you can't be judgmental about this issue. Make sure that you're open and truly listening to this person who has a concern. So the employer has the obligation to investigate the complaint, take effective action to stop the harassing, any kind of conduct, and deter future harassment behaviors, be prompt, and prevent that retaliation. So that's it. So any questions, concerns? Did I miss anything? Did you think of? Okay. And I want to thank you for your kind attention, even if you were in the back of this auditorium. And I do appreciate all the help that I got with mics and so on. Appreciate your kind attention.